some sample problems which will illustrate the physical concepts that we have been looking at regarding AC machines. Problem number 1 in this document is extremely simple. You simply apply the equation to figure out the frequency. What is the frequency of the output voltage of an alternator with 4 poles if the alternator is rotated at 2800 RPM? Simple enough. Hopefully there is no mistake in my calculations. 93.33 Hertz is the answer, approximately. Now the second problem is also extremely simple, but there is something here that is worth noting. The problem says if the no-load output voltage of an alternator is 250 volt and the full load output voltage is 200 volt, calculate the percentage voltage regulation. Simple enough. 250 minus 200 divided by 200 and multiply the result by 100. That gives you a very large voltage regulation, 25%. Is it? Anyway, even if the answer is wrong, just double check this answer, okay? You get the value, okay? Now, the third problem is actually interesting. In problem 2, is the answer fully complete? The solution is no. We have not mentioned the power factor at which the calculations were made. In AC machines, in AC generators, regulation is always mentioned along with the power factor at which the measurement was done. So this is the problem I wanted to show you. Okay. The correct answer will be only when you include the power factor. Now, the next one is also very interesting. In problem 2, the nature of power factor. Can you figure out the nature of power factor? We can go back to problem 2 again. It says the no load output voltage is 250 volt and full load output voltage is 200 volt. So at full load, the output voltage is dropping. Does it tell you something about the power factor of the load? If you don't remember, let me go back to a screenshot from my own notes. This is the diagram I had given in my notes for an alternator. When load current goes up, the load voltage or output voltage goes up if the power factor is leading. That is proven theoretically and observed experimentally also. At no load, of course, there will be no difference. So we have a horizontal line. At unity power factor, the output voltage drops, but not that much compared to no load voltage. But at lagging power factor, it drops significantly at full load. So if you keep this diagram in mind, you should be able to answer the question that is being asked there. The power factor at, yeah, this is already done. The power factor definitely is not leading because the output voltage is lower than the full load voltage is lower than the no load voltage. So leading power factor is out of the question. It is either unity power factor or lagging power factor. But at lagging power factor, the difference between input and output voltage is not very large. Sorry, at unity power factor, the difference is not very large. At lagging power factor, it is significantly large. So our guess will be that most likely we are looking at a lagging power factor in the load because this voltage regulation value is quite high. Okay. This is how qualitatively you answer these kind of quiz questions. If the voltage regulation is negative, then you have a leading power factor. If voltage regulation is positive, you have either unity power factor or lagging power factor. Now, if the voltage regulation is high, then you have a lagging power factor. If the voltage regulation is positive but small, then probably you have a unity power factor. These are ground level realities in alternators. That's why I'm showing you all these problems. Okay, so this is written here as well. For leading power factor, full load voltage is higher than no load voltage, hence the power factor is not leading type for sure in this case. And it is either unity or lagging type. But the difference between no load and full load voltage is high, so most likely we are looking at lagging power factor. Okay. Next one is regarding induction motor. It is again simple enough. A three-phase induction motor is being supplied with 208 volt, 50 hertz supply. The number of stator poles per phase is 4. The rotor is rotating at 1455 RPM. Calculate the percentage slip. So the first thing you do is calculate synchronous speed, NS, which is 120 F by P. Number of poles is given, F is given, figure out NS. It is 1500 RPM. The actual speed is given as 1455 RPM. Let us call it N. They call it NM also in many books. M, small m means motor or mechanical sometimes. So the slip is now calculated easily as NS minus N divided by NS and the result multiplied by 100 if you want the answer in percentage. Okay. Simple enough. You get 3% slip as the answer. Now, next one says, problem 6 says, in problem 5, calculate the frequency of the electrical signal generated in rotor. It is simply given by slip multiplied by the stator frequency. Unfortunately, in induction motors, the frequency in the rotor is a variable. It depends on slip. In the beginning, when rotor is not rotating, slip is 1. Stator and rotor frequency are the same. But as rotor starts rotating, the frequency in the rotor, the electrical frequency in the rotor, starts getting smaller. And this formula is based on simple relative motion between the two. So F rotor is slip times F stator. And slip is already known as 0.03. Obviously, you will use the relative value, not the percentage value. So rotor frequency at a slip of 0.03 is 1.5 hertz if stator frequency happens to be 50 hertz. Simple calculations without needing equivalent circuit. Another one, again, straightforward application of the equation. A 60 hertz alternator has 2 poles. What is the speed of the alternator? N is 120 F by P. Do the calculations. It is 3600 RPM. This is the American system. Americans rotate their turbines at 3600 RPM because they want 60 hertz signal all the time. In India, we use 50 hertz signal, so we have to rotate the gas turbine at 3000 RPM. Okay. British also do the same. They generate 50 hertz. Gas turbines usually can handle 3600 RPM as well. So it's not a big issue. Now, regarding power rating, etc. A three-phase alternator is rated at 110 kVA. This is all line information, 11 kV. Assuming unity power factor of the load, how much power would the alternator produce at full load? So all you do is you take this 110 kVA rating multiplied by the power factor, which happens to be 1 in this case. So the answer is simple enough. 110 kilowatt. Repeat problem 8 with 0.8 power factor lagging and 0.8 power factor leading. Whether power factor is lagging or leading does not matter in calculating the power consumed, because cos phi is the same whether phi is negative or positive. But you multiply 110 by 0.8 to get the answer, which is now 88 kilowatt in both cases. Next one, we have done something similar previously, but let me again read this. Calculate the line voltage of a three-phase 50 Hertz star-connected alternator given the following. Kp is an empirical constant which depends on the pitch of the windings being used. This number is given to you as 0.85. Kd depends on the direction of the winding. Don't worry too much about details here. Just take these empirical factors as they are given to you. Kd is 0.98. Flux per pole is 0.67 Weber and number of turns per phase is 36. Calculate the line voltage. It is star-connected alternator. So you use this equation which I have given you in the past. This equation gives you phase voltage, magnitude. 4.443 phi FNP KD KP. Phi is given as 0.67 Weber, NP is 50. No, I think F is 50 Hertz, NP is 36. KD and KP are given. Plug in the values. You should get 4463.43 volts. And this equation is supposed to give you RMS value. Now the catch is that they want line voltage. And they have given you star-connected alternator. So line voltage will be square root of 3 multiplied by phase voltage. Hence you multiply 4463.43 by square root of 3 to get the line voltage magnitude. The answer is 7731 volts approximately. Okay. And the last one in this is repeat the previous problem with delta connected alternator. If you have delta connected alternator, line voltage and phase voltage have the same magnitude. So the answer is simply 4463 volts approximately. Okay. Simple problems, but worth having a look at. Now, one more document which I wanted to show you is on induction motors in particular. As you know, we are never happy until and unless we have drawn some equivalent circuit for any motor or any generator. So I'll give you a brief outline of how equivalent circuit is drawn for a three-phase induction motor. We will not do too much of calculations, but you should understand how to capture reality on paper, approximately. Let's go back to three-phase induction motor. I have written once again what I have been telling you. In this type of motor, the rotor rotates at a speed capital N, RPM, which is slightly less than the synchronous speed. And synchronous speed is nothing but the speed of the rotating flux produced by the stator, which is fed from a three-phase supply, and supply can be delta or star. The synchronous speed, as usual, is given by 120 F by P. Now here I'm going to distinguish between stator frequency and rotor frequency, because rotor frequency will change depending on the slip. So let me call stator frequency F1 for a change. So I'm writing the well-known formula slightly in a different form. I'm calling the synchronous speed as 120 F1 divided by P. F1 is the frequency of the three-phase input to the stator. P is the number of poles per phase on the stator. Slip definition I have repeated here once again for reference. It is Ns minus N divided by Ns, and you can multiply the result by 100 if you want percentage answer. Okay, simple enough. Now equivalent circuit looks quite similar to what we saw for transformer, with two differences. The secondary side, which is the rotor, is short circuited. We have seen that there are short circuiting rings on both sides of the rotor. So this is a transformer in which secondary is short circuited. But of course, secondary will have its own resistance, R2, which is shown on the right hand side. In addition, the secondary has a variable frequency, which I am calling F2. With these two differences, the equivalent circuit looks similar, very close to what we saw for transformer. We have supply voltage. This is single phase equivalent circuit. Okay, supply voltage Vs, then stator resistance R1, stator reactance X1, then core losses are captured by a parallel circuit containing core resistance and core magnetizing inductance, as we saw in transformers. Then the remaining current goes and produces the rotating flux in the stator, and that flux couples to the rotor to produce the EMF in the rotor. E1 is the equivalent EMF in the stator per phase. E2 is the same thing on the secondary side or the rotor side. Now, in this case, unfortunately, there is a large coupling loss. That's the reality because of the way construction is done. E1 and E2 will never be equal for sure. There may be a significant difference. E2 will always be lower than E1 for sure. Conservation of energy would apply. But I'm not giving you any formula to convert E1 into E2. Normally in problems, they give you how much energy is lost in the coupling process. That helps in figuring out E2. Okay. And other problem is that frequency is variable in the secondary side. So I'll come to that a bit later, but at least remember that this equivalent circuit is showing E1 and E2, but with no transformation ratio given, because that will be given to us based on experiments most of the time. There is no theory that can predict this transformation that easily. Okay. Now this is the equivalent circuit. The secondary side current, of course, is being called I2, and there is no voltage because it's all short circuited anyway. And secondary side resistance, that means rotor winding resistance, is R2, and inductance in the rotor is L2, and correspondingly we will see a reactance X2. Unfortunately, X2 will depend on F2, and F2 is a variable with slip, so that has to be captured in interpreting the equivalent circuit. Anyway, first the explanation for various symbols. I have already gone through it. R1 is resistance of stator winding, X1 is inductance of stator winding, RC is core loss resistance on the stator side, XM is magnetizing reactance on the stator side. Stator is the primary side, rotor is the secondary side. X2, actually X2 is not inductance, it is the inductive reactance of rotor winding. Okay, X2 represents the inductance, it is not inductance. There's a mistake here, I'll correct it. R2 is resistance of the rotor winding, no issue with that. Vs is voltage applied to stator at frequency F1, and F1 is the frequency of the input to the stator. F2 is the frequency of the EMF induced in the rotor, which this frequency is variable. The equivalent circuit is similar to that of a transformer, since the induction motor can be thought of as a transformer with rotating and short-circuited secondary winding. Also note that in general, stator and rotor operate at different frequencies, F1 and F2. If N is 0, then F2 is F1. Well-known things. The magnetizing current that produces the required flux in the stator is I0, and it has two components, IW and I mu, like in case of transformers. That is what is captured here. Unfortunately, in induction motors, this current I naught is quite large compared to transformers. A very large core is there. It needs a lot of current just to get going. So even at no load, the induction motor will draw enough current to keep its stator energized. These are big machines, compared to transformers. But anyway, theory doesn't change because of that. When a three-phase supply is connected to stator windings and EMF is induced in the short-circuited windings of the rotor, the greater the relative motion between rotor and the rotating flux by the stator, the larger the value of the induced EMF. This is the physics of the problem. The maximum induced EMF occurs at standstill. When rotor is not rotating, then maximum possible EMF will be induced in its windings. And as rotor starts rotating, the amount of EMF starts getting less and less. Rotor never catches up fully with stator's flux, but it gets there close enough. And the difference is known as slip. Right? We have seen that. N equal to 0 is well known as locked rotor condition or standstill condition. This is true for all motors, even for DC motors. Now, suppose at standstill, the induced EMF in the rotor is denoted by E2 0. And the induced EMF at any general speed is denoted by E2. Then the relation between them is simply E2 equal to slip multiplied by E2. When slip is 1, that means standstill rotor, both of these are equal. Rotor resistance, of course, doesn't change with speed, but rotor reactance, L2 is the inductance of the rotor winding. It doesn't change with speed. But the reactance is 2 pi F2 L2. And F2, unfortunately, depends on slip and F1. F2 is S times F1. So if you plug in this value of F2 in equation 7, back in equation 6, you get X2 as 2 pi F2 L2, which is 2 pi S F1 L2. And if I define 2 pi F1 L2 as rotor's reactance at standstill, that means at S equal to 1, then the reactance at any other speed or at any other slip is S multiplied by X2 naught. Of course, when slip is 1, then X2 equal to X2 naught. Now, in general, the rotor reactance or rotor impedance is R2 plus JX2. And we put the values there. I'm not going to do much calculation, but I'll show you how people have drawn equivalent circuit and how it is possible to predict I2, etc. based on R2, L2, R1, L1 given to you. So all the equations that you need for figuring out the various currents and various voltages. Of course, in the secondary, it is short-circuited anyway. No voltage will be generated. But primary side or stator side is where you may like to know IS, I1, I0, etc. All that can be done based on this equivalent circuit and the equations that I have captured here. I'm not going to ask you to do detailed calculations here. It gets too much for a mechanical engineer. Now, with this background, let me look at a few solved problems without using the equivalent circuit too much. Some of these problems, I think, were solved in the previous lecture also, but let's go through it once again. A 208 volt, 10 horsepower, 4 pole, 60 hertz Y-connected induction motor has a full load slip of 5%. Calculate the synchronous speed of the motor and the rotor speed at full load. You don't need equivalent circuit for this. NS and N. We have done this previously also, but let's look at the solution. NS is 120 F by P. You plug in the values, you get 1800 RPM. Slip is given as 5%. Use that to figure out N, which turns out to be 1710 RPM. Okay. This problem is simple enough. Problem 2 says, for the motor in problem 1, calculate the rotor frequency, which is also simple. S multiplied by F1. F1 is 60 Hertz, S is 0.05. So multiply the two to get the result. It turns out to be 3 Hertz. In many books, they don't call it F2, they call it FR or F rotor. And instead of F1, they call it FS or F stator. So that's okay with me. Okay, and third problem is continuation of this problem. For the motor in problem 1 and problem 2, calculate the shaft torque at the rated speed. The output power is 10 horsepower and output speed is 1710 RPM. So based on that, you figure out omega. Let's call it omega M. M means motor or mechanical. And output power is 10 multiplied by 746 watts. Once you know PM and omega M, PM is easy to calculate. PM divided by omega M. Answer is around 41.66 Newton. Don't need equivalent circuit for these kind of top level calculations. A 480 volt, 60 Hertz, 50 horsepower, 3-phase induction motor is drawing 60 amperes at 0.8 power factor lagging. Here also you don't need equivalent circuit, but it is more like looking at the functionality of the motor and try to figure out power at various stages. 480 volts, 60 Hertz, 50 horsepower, 3-phase induction motor is drawing 60 amperes at 0.8 power factor lagging. The stator copper loss is 2 kilowatt, rotor copper loss is 700 watt, friction and windage taken together is 600 watt, core losses in the stator are 1800 watt, and stray losses, anything else, is 0. This one is quite interesting. It deals with the power flow in the machine. So what do they want? They want the air gap power. That means actual power that has coupled from stator to rotor. Okay, we'll do that. The power converted. Okay, there's a difference between the two. We'll come to it slowly. Okay, the output power and the efficiency. Let's see how we do it. First of all, input power, whether it's a star connected motor or delta connected motor, the input power is always the total input power, including all the phases, is the square root of 3 VLL IL into power factor. This formula has been proven in the past. So VL magnitude is 480, IL is 60 amperes, cos phi is 0.8. So we use all those values here. Sorry, 0.85. The input power turns out to be 42.4 kilowatt. Now, air gap power is defined as input power minus stator copper loss. Because input power is coming, copper loss in the stator will take some part of it, and the rest will go and couple to the rotor. We'll try to couple to the rotor. So P in minus stator copper loss. P in is 42.4 kilowatt and minus core loss also in the stator. Whatever losses are there in the stator, subtract them from the input power to get the air gap power. 42.4 minus stator copper loss minus stator core loss. Stator copper loss, wait, 1 minute. Stator copper loss is 2 kilowatt, right? And core losses are 1800 watt. So let's make sure these numbers are correctly taken here. Yeah, 2 kilowatt and 1.8 kilowatt. So from 42.4 kilowatt, you subtract 2 kilowatt and 1.8 kilowatt to get the air gap power. Now converted power will be air gap power minus rotor's loss. Rotor will take some of the power back away, and then rest will be converted to rotation. So PAG minus rotor copper loss, which is 0.7 kilowatt. I think it was given as 700 watt, which is 0.7 kilowatt. So converted power is 38.6 kilowatt from the previous step minus rotor copper loss, which is 0.7 kilowatt. That gives you 37.9 kilowatt converted power. Now output power will be this converted power minus all the mechanical losses. Converted power is the electrical power. From there, mechanical losses have to be subtracted to get the actual output power, which means friction, windage, and any stray losses. Fortunately, stray losses are zero in our case, but friction and windage total was given as 0.6 kilowatt. So you subtract that 0.6 kilowatt from 37.9 kilowatt to get the actual mechanical output power as 37.3 kilowatt, which actually works out to 50 horsepower almost, which is the rated power of the motor. So motor is operating at almost full rated power. 50 HP is the recommended value of output power, and we are operating at that. Okay. Now efficiency. Output power, which is 37.3 kilowatt, divided by input power, which is 42.4 kilowatt, and multiply the result by 100. The efficiency of the motor is around 88%. Next problem says if the motor in the previous problem is operating at 10% slip and the number of poles in the machine per phase is 8, calculate the torque developed by the motor and the rotor frequency. Again, you don't need equivalent circuit for this. 10% slip. Okay, let's see what we do. First of all, you calculate synchronous speed using the equation and information. You get 900 RPM. Since slip is 10%, the actual speed will be 10% lower than 900. So that works out to 810 RPM. Once you know N, you calculate omega M by using 2 pi N by 60. And you know output power as 37.3 kilowatt, right? So divide that power by omega M, you get the output torque. Hopefully there is no calculation mistake. This is how you calculate the output torque of the motor. How about rotor frequency? It is simply slip multiplied by the stator frequency. It's not even done here. Okay, actually it's done here. No, it's not done, but it's very easy to figure out. Stator frequency is 60 hertz, I think. Let me check. Yeah, it's 60 hertz. So 60 hertz multiplied by 0.1. Slip is 10%, which is 0.1. So rotor frequency will be 6 hertz. It's not given here, but it's easy to figure out. Okay. This is how you tackle induction motor problems, even without worrying too much about actual currents and voltages. Okay. Now, one very interesting variation of induction motor is single phase induction. This is the one we use in ceiling fans. This motor obviously has a single phase input, not three phase input. By the way, in case you are curious, this diagram, this is actually a picture of your ceiling fan opened up. This is a single phase induction motor. Let me begin at the beginning. Whatever time is left, otherwise we'll continue next time. Single phase induction motor in principle is slightly different from three phase induction motor. First of all, three phase induction motor is capable of starting automatically. Single phase induction motor is not. We have to do special things to get it going. Of course, the fan that you have in your rooms does not need any external push because things have been done internally to get it started. This is the most frequently used motor for refrigerators, washing machines, clocks, drills, compressors, pumps, ceiling fans. They have not mentioned it here. The single phase induction motor stator, of course, it's laminated as usual. It has two windings arranged perpendicularly. Don't worry too much about details. Take the bigger picture in your head right now. Two windings are necessary for a region which relates to the starting of the motor. One of them is known as main winding. The other one is known as auxiliary winding or starting winding. Let me see how much I can talk about today. Anyway, the stator of this motor looks like this. Someday, if you go into a workshop which repairs ceiling fans, you may see things like that. Okay. Now, theory essentially tells you what happens is you have a single phase input now, not three phase input. So, stator does not produce a rotating flux. Instead, it produces a stationary flux whose polarity keeps changing continuously at a certain time interval. It is called pulsating flux. So rotor, although it is short-circuited, is unable to get rotated because the main flux is not rotating. So rotor also doesn't rotate. Instead, rotor starts behaving in a very, pulsating manner. It tries to do something in trying to line up with the behavior of the main flux, but it doesn't rotate for sure. It creates humming noise in the process, yes. And most of the time in single phase motors, because speed is not very large, we use a squirrel cage construction. That means aluminum bars short circuited on both sides using aluminum rings. Now, the theory says that if you have a stationary flux, it can be conceptually thought of as the superposition of two oppositely rotating fluxes. One rotating in the clockwise direction, other in the anti-clockwise direction, and both have equal magnitudes. Then the result will be a stationary flux. So revolving field theory is used to explain the principle of operation of this kind of motor. Anyway, before that, there is a good photograph here of a squirrel cage rotor. You see aluminum bars, colored ones, and in between there are slots which insulate the bars from each other. The bars are slanted a bit. This has helped in improving the efficiency of the machine. There's a lot of detail here. You may want to study this diagram or this photograph later in detail. But important thing is that you have got the rotor bars, not thin conductors on the rotor. That makes the construction very sturdy and almost maintenance free and long lifespans, like 40, 50 years. can be obtained with these kind of constructions. And it is not expensive also to build and operate. So let me quickly mention revolving field theory, and then next time we can continue on this operating principle. The single-phase induction motor operation can be described by two methods: double revolving field theory and cross field theory. Forget cross field theory. It is very complicated. Double revolving theory is perhaps the easier of the two. They are also saying learn the double revolving theory only. Don't worry about the other. That is meant for people who are experts in electromagnetism. Double revolving field theory, what does it say? A single phase AC current supplies the main winding that produces a pulsating magnetic flux. It doesn't rotate, but it changes polarity all the time. Mathematically, the pulsating field could be divided into two fields which are rotating in opposite directions. The interaction between the fields and the current induced in the rotor bars generates opposing torque. So rotor doesn't rotate normally. Now to get the rotor started, what we do is we use that second winding called auxiliary winding or starting winding to initially cancel one of the rotating fluxes, at least partially. Like right now, in the beginning, both the fluxes are oppositely rotating but and have equal magnitude. Suppose you make one of them weak by supplying current to an extra winding called starting winding or auxiliary winding. Then the net torque developed will be more than zero because one field has weakened. So rotor starts rotating, depending on which of the field is stronger. And once rotor starts rotating, inertia will keep it going, even if you remove the correction to one of the fields. So that is the way these motors are started electrically. Other method could be you do give it a mechanical push, but that is not possible in ceiling fans. It would look very funny if every time you want to start your ceiling fan, you have to rotate it with your hand or something. So electrical solutions have been built into the construction by using that second winding called auxiliary winding or starting winding, which is energized in the beginning to partially cancel out one of the fluxes so that rotor starts rotating. As rotor starts picking speed, the auxiliary winding is taken out of the circuit. And then pulsating field is enough to keep the rotor going because of its inertia. That is roughly the physical explanation without any mathematics. Okay. Of course, they are saying if an external torque is involved, then also you can start the rotor. But we avoid that in real life, especially for refrigerators, ceiling fans, etc. We use electrical solution. So pulsating field is divided into this. Forget about this equation. This is simply slip anyway. So forget this formula. Okay, equivalent circuit also you can forget. I don't think we have time to go into details of this motor. We have many other items to look at. So forget mathematics here. Okay, remember the physical part of how this motor works. This PPT has given a lot of information on this motor. Important thing is that we need a starting winding, which is energized in the beginning to get the rotor going, and as rotor picks up the speed, you de-energize that winding. Or coil, if you want, you can call it a coil. It is known as auxiliary coil or auxiliary winding also. Three-phase motors don't need that because they are capable of starting by themselves. Okay, so let me stop here today.